Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about whether USA and China will go to war. Graham Allison in his book, Destined for War, points to Thucydides' trap in order to predict what might happen. Thucydides is considered to be the father of history. He lived in ancient Greece and he's most known for documenting the Peloponnesian War, which was between Athens and Sparta. He famously described the war with this quote: "It was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable." Back in 430, Sparta was the ruling power for more than 100 years. They had a military-focused society and also had the strongest land force in mainland Greece. On the other hand, you had Athens, which was completely different from Sparta. They were a port city that flourished in trade, and they took pride in their culture and their democratic government. Now, both city-states tried their best to avoid war. They even signed a 30-year peace treaty and fought alongside each other in the Persian Wars. Unfortunately, this is called Thucydides' trap for a reason, and no matter with all the diplomatic efforts, it still ended in war. Thucydides explained the trap as the severe structural stress caused when a rising power threatens to upend a ruling one. To me, the trap is common sense and basic human psychology. Like, if I was in a position of power and I see my rival gaining momentum, yes, that is gonna make me feel threatened. And if you look at modern day, it's easy to tell the parallels with ancient Greece. You have USA, who is the ruling power for the past 80 years or so, and then you have China as the rising power thanks to their economic boom for the past 30 years. At Harvard University, they studied the past 500 years and they identified 16 cases where a rising power challenged an established power. And out of those 16, 12 of them ended in war. So right off the bat, history is saying that we have a 75% chance of going to war with China. But I don't think it's that simple, and we should be digging a little bit deeper. So let's start off with defining two key drivers at play with this trap. Number one, you have the rising power. They're going through a period of growth and have a good economy. They start investing in their military, which grows rapidly. And with this growth, there comes a sense of entitlement and wanting to feel important and demand a greater say in the world stage. Number two, you have the ruling power, who has been the king of the hill for the past few decades, and they don't want that to change. And we know that this trap is a pattern because it not only happened in ancient Greece, but it also explains why World War I and World War II happened. You see, back in 1900, Britain was the undisputed ruling power at the time. They had an incredibly strong navy, which they used to colonize and create this massive empire around the world. They developed global trade routes and used their navy to protect them. And they were also considered both the policeman and the banker of the world's first true superpower. While Britain was prospering, Germany was building itself up. Ottoman Bismarck he came together and united all the German states, and he had this ambition of conquering Europe. He attacked Austria and France, and that quite literally put them on the map. They led in manufacturing, exports, schools, and innovations, so they were in a really good moment. With all this growth that Germany was experiencing, they were determined to become a global great. And the only way to do that is to challenge the ruling power at the time, which was Britain. So they rigorously built up their navy, and it literally in just one man's lifetime, they became strong enough to challenge Britain for that number one spot. And that's eerily similar to what's happening right now with China. As you can imagine, Britain became anxious when they see Germany rapidly building up their navy, so they ended up gaining alliances with France and Russia. France and Russia, they were like number 2 and number 3 at the time, so they were also like, yo, we do not want Germany to be this strong. So that's why they grouped together, and then Germany allied with themselves with Austria-Hungary. And you know, you can see now that pretty much all the dominoes were in place, and you just needed a spark for them to fall, and then a full wage-out war would happen. World War II was triggered in a very similar fashion. After World War I ended, Britain, France, and Russia stayed as the ruling powers of Europe, and then Germany went through this rebuilding phase. And then when the Nazi Party took over Germany, they focused all of their resources into their military. And then once again, when everyone heard of Adolf Hitler's ambition to conquer Europe, the established powers allied themselves together. Germany attacked Poland in September 1939, and that started the most deadliest conflict in human history. Okay, so let's look at the charts of the wars, right? The 16 cases that I mentioned before. And there's 4 instances where the trap did not end in war. The most notable example is the Cold War. The Soviet Union was challenging USA to be the dominant superpower of the world. It was pretty much capitalism versus communism. And what amazes me is that every instance before the Cold War, when a rising power challenged a ruling one, there was war. And then after we created the nuclear bomb, we somehow avoid war. As ironic as it may sound, I think the reason that we were able to avoid war is because of the nuclear weapons. You see, this is what deterrence is. When you know that your opponent has a nuclear weapon, you're not going to attack them because, well, they're just gonna retaliate the same way. We all know China has nuclear weapons, and that's why I'm pretty confident that we're never going to use a nuclear weapon on them, because it would essentially be suicide. After World War II, right, Britain and France were pretty much the 2 top dogs in Europe. But in the 1990s, Germany grew to become an economic powerhouse of Europe. It's where the central bank is for Europe, or for the EU rather. And it was a very peaceful transition of power. And you know, that's another very good sign of hope that we can avoid war. But that brings me to my next question, which is, well, actually 2 questions. Would the US ever step down from being number 1? Or would China accept being in that number 2 position? There's a common belief that China views themselves as the center of the universe. And even their president, Xi Jinping, said many times in his speeches before that he will bring China back to its rightful place. And when you hear a president, or honestly, he's more like a dictator at this point, when you hear him say that, like, you have to assume that he wants to bring China as the number 1 power. This trap is in full swing. You have the structural stress pressuring both nations. And if our leaders and diplomats don't work together, war is inevitable. But me personally, I do believe that we will avoid war with China. But as a fellow citizen, all we can do is really just vote and elect the right leaders and pray to God. But yes, anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that, and I hope you were able to learn something today. I'd love it if you could give me a comment down below. Let me know what your perspective is, what you think, if we will go to war, if we don't, or if I missed any key points that I should have hit. But anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for next week. Thank you very much.